There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. It is Tuesday, September 24th. Welcome to the South Star Classroom podcast.
Oh,
We are on
well,
episode 158, and we have an exciting show for everyone today. We're gonna talk about some theory, and then we're also gonna kind of get into the nuts and bolts of what how to make the theory into actual change for students. So it's a subject that we've covered before. We'll get into the details here shortly, but I feel like it's as new information comes out, new research, we got to keep circling back and addressing it. So that's what we're going to do today. But with all that said, I'm David Castillo, one of the co-hosts for the show. We've got Mr. Omar Yunar hailing out of El Paso, Texas.
indeed,
Texas. Yeah.
indeed.
So what's going on? How are you doing?
I like that we're going to talk about change today. Hey, David, I see no changes. All I see is
Mhm.
racist faces.
Okay.
I don't know. Quote. I don't know. You're not following me on the Tupac song. Really good song.
Yeah, I am.
They
I am. I got
sampled.
you. I got you.
Indeed, man. That's what I see. That's what I see. However,
Okay.
what am I seeing this week?
Yeah.
Man, we are about to finish up quarter one with our kiddos.
Mhm.
So, man, it's crazy. We already started in August. Our kids are going to be off starting next week for the next 2 weeks for what's called intercession. So,
Oh,
just
wow.
as like a quick ed thing,
Yeah.
years ago, ladies and gentlemen, if you remember school, you probably started sometime in September. And then when was your first break? Like November, right? Like Thanksgiving. So, in the ed world, we studied the phenomenon called the October slump. And this is when like students and teachers just dive. So meaning like student attendance dives, student scores dive, teacher attendance dives. And
Yep.
it's because it's too much time between when you start in September and then the Thanksgiving break. So a lot of schools, ours included, have adopted the fall break, which is a really cool idea, giving 2 weeks off in the fall, like a spring break, to give everybody a really clean break. What we found is that fall break re-engages kids, re-engages teachers, discipline decreases, absences decrease. So just you're like, what? Like you're giving 2 weeks off in the fall. If that's not happening in your school district, you should ask. It's a really good practice. Although you guys are doing fall break, right, David?
No, not like that. Not like that. But I will say, I think both here in the household, and then also across several of my different clients. And some of my clients are I'm working directly with like large scale school districts. They're all feeling it right now. Like it's just like it in so many different ways. The same thing is coming through of like, wow, the first couple of weeks or the first month of school is intense. There's so much change, and people are just trying to get their feet on the ground. So I mean, obviously, young people are feeling it too. So the idea of taking an extended break just to let everybody kind of, you know, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the practice is practical, for lack of better terms, meaning like it's your first 9 weeks. What happens psychologically with teachers and kids is that they see the light at the end of the tunnel. So when the
Yeah,
light at the end of the tunnel is all the way to Thanksgiving break, they're like, oh, it's demoralizing, it's tough, it's hard. If the light at the end of the tunnel is in
yeah,
October, the level of excitement and kind of urgency and stress exists because they know that there's going to be a break. But then the break itself is, in my opinion, in a ludicrous best practice, because what I've seen statistically is higher student engagement, lower
hmm,
student behavior issues, higher teacher engagement, lower teacher professional like PTOs, like personal time off
yep,
days. Man, it is a really cool calendar. And what it does is also get us away from like the traditional summer calendar of having kids off for like 3 months or 2.5 months, which we
yeah,
all
yeah, yeah,
know
yeah,
creates like that summer slump and everything.
yep,
So
yep,
it's almost like year round, almost. Like the
Yeah.
kids get a pretty solid like month and a half, 6 weeks off in the summer. But it's awesome. When did school start? School started for us like July 31st, Toya. So like the
Yeah.
very
So
beginning of August
you're
to
9, 10
full
weeks in
9
already.
weeks.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Full
Yeah. That's
nine
an early
weeks.
start. I mean, I think even for, and we'll get onto the subject, but I think this is interesting. What you're seeing kind of universally is, historically, like school would start after Labor Day and it would end
Mm-hmm.
in like June, and you'd have a huge block of summer, right? For some young people, that's a great thing. They can take extended vacations with their families and do all of this. She says, "Oh yeah, and y'all need a damn break."
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
But over the course of the last like 20 years, you do feel the school year kind of extending and summer kind of narrowing, and people still get a month and a half of summer or whatever, even 2 months. It feels about right. And then it kind of does take the pressure off of the school year because you have larger breaks in between. So,
Yeah.
um,
And I will
that's
say this, like I'll be honest, dude, if you're a middle class parent, you're an upper middle class parent, what are you doing with your kids in the summer?
mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what are you doing with your kids
Yeah.
in the summer, dude? You're sending them off to
Yeah.
camps, you're taking trips, it's all
Yep.
learning. But for our low income kids
Yeah.
whose parents are working 2 to 3 jobs, they're working hourly schedules, dude, what is summer
Yeah.
like for them? It's a nightmare because they're trying to figure out what are we doing with the kids. We don't have the money to send them to camps. They don't want to go to camps. So the kids
Yeah.
are just like, all right, dude, I'm staying at home doing nothing. The overwhelming consensus amongst my students when I ask them, and I already know the answer, is like, "What'd you do this summer?" They're like, "Mr. was boring. I didn't do anything. I couldn't really leave the house." And I'm like, "Oof." If they're
Yeah.
lucky, they got a trip to Mexico.
Yep. Yeah. It's a very different reality for sure.
And a
For
trip to
sure.
Mexico for our audience is very different. So these kids are
Yeah.
not going to resorts in Acapulco. They're getting in the car and driving 12 hours to like
No,
Aguascalientes or
Nogales.
like Nogales, Tamaulipas to visit family.
Ciudad Acuña. Yeah. Yeah.
She said, Ciudad Acuña, yes,
Yeah.
where they film
Yeah.
mariachi, man.
Exactly. Yeah. I've been there.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
I
we
know
don't
you
have
have
beer.
too.
All we got is Chango. That was the name of
Yeah.
the beer. What are they,
Great
dude?
film.
How are you,
Great
David?
film.
What's up, brother? Yeah, I love that.
I am good. I'm good. We are. I started. I think I've said this before, but part of my new. It's not a new health kick, but just trying different things that I can be consistent with. I started swimming, and so I've really been enjoying that. I just got out of the pool about an hour ago.
Yeah, you're Aquaman. You're all
Um,
aquatic, man.
It's
Ooh,
great,
an
man.
hour
I
ago.
love
Hey,
it.
man,
I
how you
love it.
feeling, baby?
I love it. So it's kind of like my midday. Like instead of having lunch, I'll have a snack
Mhm.
and I'll go swim at the pool and come out and then get back to work for several hours. But it's good. It's good cardio. It's good full body workout. You get plenty of
It's so
sun.
good for you. It's like the best. It is the absolute best cardio workout anyone can do. And it's
Yeah.
arguably the best physical workout, but arguably the best health one because the exertion is safe. So like running, you're like
Yeah,
wearing
yeah.
out your knees, wearing everything out. Like
Yeah.
swimming, like you're not creating damage. All you're doing is
Nope.
net benefit. Big time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's great. What else is happening? So now we are part of a new high school community because son started 9th grade, and we haven't had our homecoming game yet, but we're definitely like in that mode now as like parents and like community members. This has never happened to us because in middle school you don't really have sports, at least down here. But now we're like in the high school world, and so we're going to be going to the homecoming game. We're going to start to go to football games, and root our home team on. So that's pretty cool. It feels like it's like a very American thing to do, right?
Super. Well, dude, I mean, you're talking to a Texan, right? Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Like
it's crazy
high
over there.
school football in Texas is a religious experience.
Yep.
And I'm not
Yep.
lying, for like our audience. It was really funny to like when I went to college in California and talk to like classmates and people about their high school football program. They'd be like, yeah, we played. A couple people showed up. It was fun. Like we went out, and I'm like, dude, this like Texas, holy smokes, dude! Like the whole community comes out in certain places.
Yeah.
So like if you're in Odessa, like that is straight up like
Yeah.
Napoleon Dynamite. That is like Uncle Rico showing up to the game in his Letterman jacket from '86, basically being like, if they put me in the game in '85, we would have won state. Look at these kids. Like straight up, that's what's going on, man. If you're in Midland Lee, if you're in Odessa, a
Oh
bunch
man.
of schools in the Dallas area, like that's the
Yeah.
reality, man.
It's
Of Texas
crazy.
football.
Yeah.
And
It's
like the town
generational.
was shut down, bro. The town was shut down. Like
Yeah.
when I went to Odessa, all the businesses said closed for the game, gone to the game. Some
Wow.
of them are like GTG. And I was like, what the hell does GTG stand for? Then I saw a bunch of other signs that just said gone to the game, GTG.
Gone to the game. Never heard of that. Yeah, it's a new thing.
And
Wow.
I'm talking about like not just the local businesses, bro. The Kentucky Fried Chicken was closed down. Like, there's a franchise
geez.
restaurant that's closed down
National franchise.
at
Yeah.
6:30
Shut it
p.m.
down.
on a Friday night, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, because no one is going to any of these businesses because the whole town is at the football game. So why are we going to pay for employees and people to be
Yep.
there? It's a phenomenon. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, I get you, man. I understand.
The
That's
whole
cool.
thing. So yeah, so we're heading into that. Yeah, so we are here. We are going to talk about this new piece, new like little like kind of blog entry came out, and I'm really into like the short reads these days. It's from an organization called Getting Smart. They've been around for a while, and they brought up a topic. Let me pull it up here real quick. They brought up a topic that we've talked about for a fair amount on this show, and so I want to talk for a minute about that, and then I did a little bit of research, and we've talked about this as well on the show, so we can hopefully connect the dots. Like, essentially, forget about K-12 education. Think about the world at work. Think about the new world reality that not just our students, but like people like me and you are always having to adapt to, right? Because the world is changing so quickly now. And it's not what it was 5 years ago. It's not what it was 10 years ago. I think the pandemic has changed it a lot. The racial awakening has changed it a lot. And I think people are just in this period of like reevaluating, what are our real priorities as human beings? And then what does that look like when you translate it into a changing workplace, right? So, the industry is changing, right? Constantly new types of sectors are opening up. The big one now is like, it's still tech, but now it's like AI, right? And so, what are those companies? What are those CEOs looking for in terms of qualities, for their employees? So, how the question is, the future is here. It's not like down the road, right? And so what are our schools doing? Right. What are our schools doing to prepare students for the ever-changing world? And when we're talking about really in a nutshell, and then let me pull this other stuff up, is, moving away from, not moving fully away from, moving away from things like rote memorization, right? And moving towards
yes, exactly.
Moving away from like content, because content now is accessible. I mean, it's at your fingertips, right? If kids want information, they know where to get it. I'm not even talking about AI, but definitely with AI, it's opened up a whole new kind of realm of possibility. But thinking more about not the what of what kids are going to need, but the how, right? So a very different skill set. Let's see. Let me pull this piece up here real quick. Give me 1 second. All right. So our title is fancy today. It is future ready schools, right?
Man, that sounds super
All
fancy.
right,
That's like the
let's
Tron of
see.
titles,
Yeah,
baby. Trizon.
exactly. Yeah, catchy titles. Okay, let's see. So the article is here now. It should be on the screen. Yep. So the key points of the article are schools should prioritize fostering creativity and problem solving skills to maintain the genius level creativity that we see in very young children. So it's very interesting. It kind of draws on like child psychology and that like when the brain is very like young and curious and asks the really big questions, right? Like why is the sky blue, right? Or why can I float in the water? Or just really basic fundamental questions of like that are rooted in like wonder, right? And the older we get, our brains get closed off to that kind of thinking. It happens, right? And so how can schools kind of still maintain that and support that level of creativity that we are all born with, right? And then education should be structured to provide meaningful, relevant projects. So now this is what it could look like that engage students and develop their future ready competencies. So you're seeing like a nod here to project based learning, which is happening in some school systems. Some people are still trying to figure it out. It can be complicated, but it's a different modality of learning where you want to talk briefly about like what is your definition for the average person on the street? Like what is project based learning, Omar?
So everyone's got a different definition. Before I
Yeah.
answer that question, which I'm very happy to answer, can I just ask a quick question? What's the age frame for these questions? So it's saying students that are young. Are we talking about like 5 to 10? Are we talking about 10 to 15? Are we talking 3 to 17? What would they say the time
So
frame would be?
it's a good question. So it's really probably focusing more on middle and high school.
Okay.
It's still in elementary school. Um, so this is a pretty interesting part of this article. Because if you've ever spent time with the 5-year-old, you'll remember how magical their brains are, how
Yep.
they brim with questions. Why is the sky blue? Where do people go when they die? Why is my friend sad? Is today tomorrow? That's a good one. Who made the world, right? And so then if you keep going, it tells us that the older we get, the more closed off our minds get to that kind of thinking, right?
Hmm.
And it's part of it's probably nature, but more of it has to do with, nurture, but more of it has to do with like our environment, right? And the way that the way that students are educated in schools and conversations at home, and it's more of like a cultural thing. So the question is, how can we maintain? So here it is. What should young people do all day? What's worth the commitment we can ask them, their families, to make 180 days a year for 13 to 14 years,
Mm.
right? So what is it? Focusing on like middle school and high school, I would say. So let's start there.
Sure. So my definition of project-based learning, and we're doing it at our flagship, we're implementing it at our east side. It's something I've been adamant about since we started the organization. Is I just want our audience think back to the way you were taught. Just think: were you seated
Yeah.
in rows or were you seated in groups? Were you lectured at, or did you have the ability to think and talk to your peers? Was it more like kind of rote and like memorization and like regurgitation, or was it more like, no, like I've got a project that's going to take me a few days to accomplish and I need to work with my team to do it? Project-based learning is, think about a project that takes multiple days. Students are in groups. Each student is assigned a role and specific tasks within that group, and they have to essentially figure out the answers and the processes themselves. So it becomes a student-centered effort that encourages problem solving and critical thinking, all while having students create a project management structure in order for them to complete a long-term project in a specified amount of time. Think about it like as group work. The kids have got to do the heavy lifting of thinking instead of the teacher doing the heavy lifting. It is awesome. It is what should be happening because you're teaching kids how to work in groups. See, the thing is, there's a huge difference, and I make this differentiation to our teachers all the time, and they haven't exactly learned this yet. We're teaching it to them because it's a skill set that's very hard to break. Is our kids in a group working, or is the group working together as one? There's a huge difference between 4 kids that are just doing their own thing, but they're clustered together, as opposed to 4 kids who know exactly how their small piece, like Tron. Again, man, we bring up Tron. This is the second time we brought up Tron, man. Or not Tron, Voltron. Voltron is what I meant. Like the red line and the yellow line and the black line, or the Power Rangers coming together into one unit. How are they coming together with their own little pieces that are going to unite and absolutely create a project or an outcome that wouldn't have happened had they not been working together? So that's my long explanation of project-based learning, which may be new for our audience because I don't know how much project-based learning our audience members did when they went to school. If you did, chime in. If you didn't, chime in.
And I think one of the big things with project-based learning, like Omar was saying, is it doesn't de-emphasize like content or information, but it provides a much greater emphasis on what we like to call the soft, or maybe even the hard skills in some nowadays. So we think about teaching and nurturing skills as opposed to teaching for content, right? And so this is interesting that was produced by the World Economic Forum in 2023, right? These are the top skills of 2023, thinking about the future of jobs report. So it was just last year. Analytical thinking, right? Analytical thinking, creative thinking. It's like the 2 parts of the brain, right? Resiliency, flexibility, agility, motivation, self-awareness, curiosity, lifelong learning, technological literacy, and then it goes down the list. I think number 8 should probably be a little higher, but that's okay. Empathy and active listening. And then, you go down the list. So these are what employers are saying as recent as last year are the qualities that they value, right, across a number of different employment sectors, right? And these are the kinds of things that you can teach via project-based learning. Have you seen this before? I mean, we've talked about this, and there's different ways of presenting this information, but and I think you've brought in some resources forward. They pretty much all say a similar thing, right?
Yeah, 100%. We base the core ideologies of the El Paso Leadership Academy around a very similar tenet, right? Which is this old school ideology of teaching like very direct information is dumb. I mean, like, dude, it's dumb. It's like,
yeah,
bro, listen, it's cool that you know what the War of 1812 was, but like that doesn't matter. You can look that up in a computer. Eventually, there's going to be a brain chip that is going to literally, the minute you ask what the hell the War of 1812 is, insert it into your brain. Like we're at that stage yet. It's not even going to be the intellectual work of like even AI is like, what were the outcomes of the War of 1812? What were the consequences of the War of 1812? I think the big question is, what were the conditions in the American states after the Revolutionary War that led to the War of 1812. That's that
Yeah.
analytical thinking, that creative thinking. That
Yep.
is where teaching and learning needs to be. It is less about the information and about developing the skill set, because it's been my condition that the future is radically uncertain, David. We have no idea what jobs are going to exist, dude. Bro, did 20 years ago, maybe some weirdo in like Silicon Valley that like was way smarter than me, but like I was in Silicon Valley essentially 20 years ago. I didn't imagine AI. Bro, we didn't even imagine the iPhone 20 years ago.
Yep.
Like 2004? Like what the hell kind of phone were you using? We didn't even have iPhones in 24, dude. Like,
BlackBerry.
dude, we couldn't even imagine the fact that we had this full computer, least of all AI. Think about 5 years ago, David. Everyone's got to learn how to code. Coding is like the panacea. Everyone El Paso, all these like so-called educational experts are like, if these kids don't know how to code, they're sunk, man. They're done. And now look like everyone's like, coding's dead. It's dead. If you don't know AI, you're at the bottom of the heap.
Yeah,
what
just
is it
like that,
in the
man.
next 5 years where they're now saying AI is going to be obsolete because we moved on to the next thing? This is what I'm getting at. And I think this is why employers are so emphatic about this, is that they call these the soft skills. These are the hard skills.
That's what I was getting at
Reading
earlier. Yeah,
math?
these are actually now the leading skill set, right? You can teach content. You can access content. You can access information now. Everybody, like, that's been fully democratized, right?
Yes.
But this is where like if you are focused on these particular skills in an education setting for young people, where you can really set them up for I wouldn't even say success, but set them up to enter a future that is going to look different than it looks now, right? I think over the last 20 years, we've had a quantum shift in terms of technology. It's like it's exponential, right? And it's going to continue to speed up because it's feeding onto itself, right? Computers are getting faster, they're getting smarter, they're getting smaller, and I mean, even in 5 years, I think it's going to look completely different. So what we know, and this is kind of exciting, I would say, like you have high school students in El Paso Leadership Academy. There are middle school and high school students across this country. The fastest growing employment sectors, as of like, I think last year too, technology, software development, AI, and cybersecurity, right? The more we live online, the more of our information and data is online, the more that governments rely on technology, the more that militaries rely on it, business. This is a good tip for anybody out there: cybersecurity, and then healthcare, biotech, right? It's a new, not new, but growing, quickly growing field, just given the changing demographics in terms of age in this country, more older people, right? Something that we didn't think about 20 years ago, renewable energy, green jobs, right? That wasn't a thing 20 years ago, right? Sustainability, wind energy, solar, renewable energies, et cetera, et cetera. Even things like, e-commerce and logistics, right? I think as a result of many things, but, really the pandemic, I mean, people have just gone insane and crazy with wanting to have stuff delivered to their homes, like anything quickly, same day, right?
It's got to be.
And that
that
opens up a whole world of
man. I don't want this Ready Player One situation where I got like 85 drones outside, and one's delivering Dominoes, another one's delivering a live cow, another one's delivering a literal home that could just be built in like 5 minutes. Dude, like, I don't want to live in a society where drones are everywhere, but like, I wonder if that's the inevitability. But like, there's the job. Like, are you programming the drones? Are you programming the ability to have this, like, new delivery system, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then education and ed tech is also on the list, number 5. So digital learning platforms, big explosion in terms of, I think also as a result of the pandemic, right? Pre-pandemic, we definitely had tech in schools, but post-pandemic, the expectation is that every student has a Chromebook now,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
That was not a pre-pandemic thing, man. So the pandemic kind of sped that up. Ed tech is now a thing, and there was a while where ed tech was kind of seen as sort of like the enemy. You can't replace teachers. We're not trying to replace teachers, but I think teachers learned that you can leverage technology in particular ways to, become a more effective teacher, right? And then there's a couple of other ones, but that's what's happening right now. And the biggest,
And like,
yeah, we'll
go
stop there.
ahead.
Yeah. No,
No, I'm
that
just
was
like
that was
the
like
biggest
that's like the next
movement is
thing.
in
Those are
this
those
tech
are the fastest
sector.
growing job markets. Yeah.
But like what I find is that those it's demonstrating a pattern of there is an infusion between what is the use of technology towards the advancement of human civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that, like, dude, I've got a lot of friends that work in defense, like across all sectors, across all organizations, right? They can't talk to me about what they're doing,
Yeah.
but let's just be honest here. But what their major thing is like, dude, it's a totally different world. Sure, there's some on the ground threats, but our greatest threats are starting to come in a much more technological way.
Yeah.
It's people hacking into infrastructures or into missile command systems or into banks, the destabilization. So Toya, like, it's awesome because like you're like, hey, my daughter just received her master's in cybersecurity. Like, hell yeah. Like that is truly, we have to get caught up on the new levels of defense because that is technology meeting a need of humanity. Biochem, dude, or not biochem, biotech. How are you combining technology and biology, dude? Like I was telling someone yesterday, 20 years from now, we're going to be able to photo print a brand new liver. Mock my words, dude. Mock my words. We're going to be able to, you're going to, instead of the need for a transplant where you're waiting for a donor for a brand new kidney, they're going to take your cells. They're going to probably stem cell this thing with technology, 3D print you a brand new liver from your own DNA, and blunk. And like life expectancy is expected in the next 20 years to have figured itself out so that we're living 150 to 200 years.
Yep.
There is technology, jobs, and money involved with that. So what I'm getting at is like, dude, like I wouldn't even know where to begin on how to synthesize human cells and DNA to create a new liver, but someone is. And the thing is that if we're teaching kids what is the War of 1812, how are we teaching kids the ability to think through the complexity of that kind of project? Right. Mm-hmm. I've got a former student of mine that's applying to medical school, and he's doing research right now on RNA and figuring out the dynamics of RNA to single out audience, correct me on the nomenclature and the words. It's like maybe the genomes or maybe the specific units of RNA. He's more qualified and smarter on this than I am, but basically trying to single out the exact genomes that cause Alzheimer and basically preclude that from activating so that Alzheimer's never happens. Like that's where we're at right now. Yeah, and it takes an extraordinary level of like, you've got to be able to creatively problem solve. If you're just waiting for the answer, how are you going to create the answers for the future? Yeah. If you're waiting for a teacher to tell you what to do, you are going to get left behind with the people who have already decided they know which direction they're moving in. Yep. And what I worry about, David, is like, how do you think this is going to impact our kids, our Black and brown kids?
Yeah, that's exactly. Kids? Yep. Yeah. So I mean, I think what I'm hearing is, and what I'm kind of synthesizing right now in my brain is like moving away from a world of, or at least in schools of content, and moving into a world where we can start, and young people can continue to exercise that kind of creative, that wonder part of the brain, right? And so there's that. And at the same time, we understand like what the historic conditions or response has been in school systems that educate high percentages of low income Black and brown students, immigrant students, right? And so if you think about an entire system changing, the bigger systems are going to change slower because that's just how it works, right? It's very difficult to they couldn't even like, you know, turn the Titanic in time, right? They saw what they were going into and they're like, she's turning slow. And then, you know, the other thing is school systems that serve, you know, that were more than likely under resourced are going to be probably the last ones to make these shifts, with the exception of like smaller networks, maybe smaller districts, charter networks like yours and others, to kind of get ahead of this, because you're essentially, you know, your school systems have to change to respond to what's happening in the world that they're sending children into, right? And you can't like kick the can down the road, because you're going to have seniors next year. You're going to have, and in 2 years, you're going to have more seniors. These kids we're not stopping the clock, right? Kids are going out into the world. So how quickly can you change and adapt to this new reality?
I was on mute. I wonder if our teachers know how to teach this.
Yeah.
See, I think like our conversation, brother, and it's been what's on my mind a lot lately with what we're doing with teachers and teacher coaching, and what we're trying to accomplish with our teachers is that, like, I'll use El Paso as a paradigm, but like oftentimes, a lot of cities function this way. So El Paso is a very interesting place because we're very insulated. And what I mean by that is that first, we're just geographically insulated. So for our audience, El Paso is like the far, 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 far west Texas town. We are 14 hours driving from Houston. I could get to Los Angeles quicker than I can Houston. All right. Santa Fe, which is the capital of New Mexico, is 5 to 6 hours away. Austin, which is the capital of Texas, is 9 to 10 hours away. So we are super duper isolated geographically, so much so if you look at a map, we are halfway through New Mexico. We're not bordering New Mexico as in like, oh, New Mexico starts. We're literally halfway through New Mexico, man. We're like here, and like New Mexico's here. So meaning in that isolation, we have a university here. It's called the University of Texas at El Paso. It's part of the UT system, University of Texas System State School. Bro,
Yep.
85% of El Paso teachers, 85% graduate from UT. That is insulated, meaning you know where the overwhelming majority of your teacher workforce is coming from. And I'm working with the dean right now of UTEP because he's awesome, smart, and very creative, and he wants to hyper accelerate the kind of work that we're doing. What I'm getting at is, if you're in LA and the majority of your teachers come from Cal State LA, if you're in El Paso and the majority of teachers come from UTEP, what is that training like? And are they even learning themselves how to do project-based learning? Are they learning themselves how to critically think? Are they learning themselves how to creatively problem solve? Because how can you expect the kids to learn it if the teachers don't know how to do it? And therein lies a massive conundrum, David. And like, what would be your response to that, just beyond hey man, improve teacher education. Like we're not going to be able to improve teacher education all the way around. So what do you think is going to be the next step? Because if this is what we're supposed to be doing with kids, how the heck do you think we're actually going to accomplish it?
Yep. Yeah. I don't know if I have a response for that, but I will address it for sure. Because I was thinking the same exact thing as you were talking. But this is a good comment. So I think what we're not doing is like suggesting a shift away from particular things. I think there will always be like foundational things that we should expect out of our education systems, like the development of literacy and reading and numeracy, right? These like foundational skills that should be happening in elementary school. So you go from learning to reading to learn, right? And same with mathematics. Then I think you still have the challenge, like you are all dealing with at El Paso, and I know many schools in California, I mean across the country, with the shifting student demographic of like students that are coming from other parts of the world, coming in at the high school level, the middle school level, and are in the process of learning English along with developing the skills of their native language, right? And that's something that's, that presents particular opportunities, but also challenges, right? So those things, I think they don't change. What also doesn't change is, what we talk about, having education systems and schools and classrooms that recognize the humanity of their students and the backgrounds of the students, and see that, as an asset. That's actually one of the call it soft skills. I don't know if I'd call it a soft skill or a hard skill today, but something that employers are also looking for is cultural competency and diversity awareness, right? That's a big thing. So there's definitely work that happens in K-12 to lay those foundations. Doesn't always do it so well, but my point is, like, those things don't change. When we talk about shifting the way the teaching can happen in middle and high school, I think you're right. Teachers learn how to teach primarily from whatever education program they go through. And I mean, I have yet to see one that has kind of taken a focus on advancing things like project-based learning. I mean, they're just getting around now to like recognizing the science of literacy, right? The science of reading. So we have a huge gap there. And I agree with you. I don't know what the answer is. I think, some of this, I wouldn't call it a burden, but like, school systems need to think about, how they're investing in professional development for their teachers as well. Like if you're going to shift, how are you going to provide training and support for your teachers to move into this kind of different way of teaching, right? I know you're doing it at El Paso Leadership Academy. I think it's one of the things that a lot of charter networks do well, right? They're able to kind of shift quicker and respond. They're a little bit more nimble to, the changing methods. So I don't, when it comes to like large, like university-based teaching programs, I've got zero for you.
So I want to answer a couple of questions and kind of give some perspective on here. We're going to get a little bit in the weeds educationally, but hey man, look, we're an education show. Sometimes this show, man, we don't even broach the subject of education because we got all these fun political things to talk about. But today, man, we're getting in the weeds. To Toya's point, it sounds great in theory, but kids need to know how to read and to write. And I'm with you because what we have found in our experience, Toya, and we had this like zany group of people working with us in our first few years because I was all about implementing project-based learning when we first started in 2014. And they, well-intentioned gentlemen with, I think, very well-intentioned project-based learning components. But what they didn't realize, because they both lacked an inordinate understanding of childhood development and education in general, is
Mhm.
that kids can't engage in autonomous learning and project-based learning without the foundational skill set of reading, without the foundational skill set of writing, because all the things that project-based learning is asking you to do, creative problem solving, critical thinking, autonomous learning, are higher order thinking skills that must be built on a foundation. And if that foundation doesn't exist of reading, writing, learning to think for yourself, not being dependent on your teacher, dude, you could have the best intentions of project-based learning, but it goes out the window. So what we
Yeah.
did in our flagship school is it's like, how are we building up to project-based learning, but providing that very deep-seated foundational skill set of getting kids very quickly caught up on their reading, their writing. And what we found is that when kids start gaining those literacy skill sets, the upward mobility is really quick. And then they get very hungry for something new. So we started introducing these projects and scaffolding these projects. And scaffolding is like a very formal educational term. It's a buzzword, which basically is like, hey, ma'am, instead of just saying get to point A to point F all at once, which is project based learning, and having the kids figure out B, C, D, E, and F.
Yep.
Scaffolding is the teacher intentionally gives them A and then gives them B and then gives them C and then gives them D, E, and F, and then debriefs to them so they can see the process, because then the goal is, hey, next time you do this, you're going to go from A to C. B is missing, figure it out. You're going to go from C to E. D is missing, figure it out. So you're building that skill set up. What this is to say is that we've done this. The way to teach this to teachers is through experience. The teachers
Yep.
themselves need to experience what a great project looks like. And that comes from, sadly, administrators who have a good idea about how to do this. Like, I learned project-based management and learning like Stanford Teacher Education School, man. Like, I don't tout it or talk about it a lot. But at the end of the day, like it's both a cool thing because, oh, good for you, Omar. But it's like, well, how do the administrators learn? I think, David, the goal is, if we can't fix teacher education, how do we fix the administration to go to, whether it be a convention or a program or some sort
Yeah.
of retreat, where they are not getting it fed at them like a lecture, because that sucks and it's boring. They must experience it like the kids will experience it. So I would want to go to like a conference where I'm not getting lectured at. They're putting me through the exact scenario that the kids are getting put through. And I'm like, oh, see, all I got to do is replicate what was done with me. Now I can teach the teachers, because I'm just going to replicate what they did with me with the teachers. Then the teachers just have to replicate what they're done with the kids. So I think this is a command of not just learning for the kids. This goes all the way to the top. How are your high level administrators learning how to do this, so that your school level administrators are learning how to do this, so your teachers are learning how to do this? But I think this falls on leadership. If the
Yep.
leaders aren't taking this seriously and figuring out a plan, how in the world are the kids going to get it?
Yep. Yeah. I think I attended so I started out as a social studies teacher, social sciences. And I always like to go to conferences, right? I was always trying to go to as many that I could, check out interesting workshops. And it was like, Omar, it was 20 years ago, about 20 years ago, that I attended the California Association of Social Science Teachers conference, or maybe it was the national one, and attended a panel presentation from the Buck Institute of Education, which is now like PBL World, right? So they were just starting out, and they were talking about project-based learning, about solving real-world problems in different types of configurations of students working together with different roles. And you had these like basic a rubric where you could assess what they were, if they were like solving the problem correctly, but more importantly, you could start to assess some of these soft skills via a rubric where I'm going to give myself a score. The four other people in my group are going to score me, right? So everybody's giving each other feedback around how we are working together as a team. It blew my mind. And so, we started that, started using some of their curriculum. And then we kind of started to design our own curriculum using the general like framework. If it could have been anything from a history project to a humanities project to math, science, whatever. But how could you plan, design project where students are going to be learning along the way? But more importantly, they're going to be learning in a way that, it's like the concept of the sage on the stage, right? As the teacher versus now I'm the guide on the side and I'm facilitating learning. I'm not necessarily teaching stuff. The students are kind of creating their own knowledge and meaning on their own, trying to solve some kind of a real world problem, right? So you make that connection between what's happening in the classroom and some kind of issue in the community, right? That's where you make that bridge.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. In fact, I agree. Like one of the central tenets of EPLA is like real world thinking and real world learning in real world scenarios. Because like for our kids, dude, this theoretical stuff is just like, who gives a crap?
Yeah.
Like, dude, it was the debate that I had in grad school where people are like, everyone should read To Kill a Mockingbird. Everyone should read like, J.D. Salinger. And like, look, dude, like I loved To Kill a Mockingbird. Like Catch on the Rise, still one of my favorite books in the world, right? Who gives a shit? Like if Blasphemy Ultima or Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Como Agua para Chocolate, is going to teach you the skill set, why are you so fixated on the book? And what this is a metaphor is in your discussion about what needs to happen. I think our teachers need to stop thinking about content and more about skill set. And in thinking about the skill set, I think that they need to get very proactive in taking a step back from this stage on the stage, I must be in charge, into this very intelligent planner, because all project-based learning is a well-formulated plan that you're giving the students. It's like you've got to be a really good author, and then you've got to be able to help facilitate that play. And it's like, it's like going from being an actor at the stage to a director. And I think that is the shift, the paradigm shift that our teachers need desperately. And I want to give some credence really quickly to what Toya said, because I want to make a huge point. Toya said, the brain is not fully formed until age 26. And even then the brain can be rewired. So this is a huge thing of why I share with kids like, hey man, like maybe you want to hold off on drinking and doing drugs because your brain is exponentially growing from age, 1 to 25. It's also why I'm a huge advocate of education. And I don't think I've ever shared this with our audience or not, but like I am always a proponent and an advocate of someone going back to school, because you're absolutely right about brain being rewired, because the challenges of education rewire the brain. But the beauty of those who went to college from 18 to 22, Toya, it's because it's falling right into that sweet spot of that huge time of growth and development. So I can tell you just out of personal experience, and don't just take my word for it. Look at, was it Dweck, Carol Dweck out of Stanford? David, growth mindset. Is it Carol?
Yep.
I think, yeah.
Yep.
She's out of the Stanford Ed School. I went to Stanford as an 18-year-old, and I can tell you that my brain was developed at a certain rate and it was pretty good. But when I had to compete against some of the smartest people in the world, read thousands of pages every trimester. So that's every 9 to 10 weeks, not every semester. And I had to be at this level of just, I'm constantly on. My brain developed so quickly because it was being challenged at such a ludicrous rate, not just by the content, which was extremely difficult at Stanford, but by the competition of my peers. Well, that happened in that sweet spot of 18 to 22. I can tell you, I came out a radically different person from college than when I went in. Carol Dweck's research at Stanford demonstrated the same thing for kids. We got to be able to engage the brain at this critical time, age 1 to 25. Otherwise, you're losing the sweet spot. But I got to tell you, for those adults that went back to school, here's the good news. Just like you said, the brain can be rewired. Those new challenges are going to create these new synapses and make you think better, make you analyze the world better. And I'm like, that's what the world needs right now. And that is my purpose of education. Everyone's like, what's the point of education? Is it just to get a job? I'm like, it's to develop the brain so that you live a better life. It is, yes, it will help you with your job. It will help you with your parenting. It'll help you with your relationships with your friends. It will help you with your creative problem solving. It will help you with your emotional output because it's like going to the gym, except for your brain. Think about it, dude. Like if you're going to the gym every day, lifting up this box is going to be radically easier if you've been going to the gym than if you haven't. Dealing with the complications of life will be so much easier if you've exercised the brain. And I think that's what our kids deserve. And on that note, I'm going to leave that as my final statement because, David, we got 2.5 minutes left. This show is already done, brother. Holy smokes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do this. So let's go back. Thank you, Omar, for that. And thank you, Ms. Toya, for your comments and your engagement. We really appreciate that.
Toya's the best, man. I love Toya.
Let's go back to like what kids are saying, what young people are saying they want now. And we'll end on this. So we'll end on a, let's see, where are we at? K-12 mapping. There we go. Okay. So this is what young people are saying, and we'll end on this. So after all of the theoretical and kind of aspirational, stuff that we just talked about for an hour, looking at, and this has to do with even pre-pandemic, right? A massive Gallup survey in 2018, 53% of high school students reported high levels of disengagement. That's crazy. 53, that's half, right? Pre-pandemic. Yep. 2024, another Walton Family Gallup survey reported less than half students say that their work positively challenges them. Okay. Drilling down a little bit more, 2024 results from the same survey, students said, there's an omission here. I don't know what it said. They want to learn more about something. I don't know what, we could make that up. They want their work to be presented in interesting ways, right? They want to learn in a hands-on way. They want to touch it. They want to feel it. They want to engage with their work. They want topics that are useful in the real world. Now, this is what young people are saying, right? Everyday life for a current or future job. They want to use technology that supports learning, and they want work that is challenging to them, right? So this is like directly from the mouths and minds of young people. And so I think the challenge is, we definitely didn't solve it, here, but right. Is to figure out, like, we know what the problem is. So how do we get from here to like large scale school systems? And you're right. Like, how do you get superintendents engaged in this very specific conversation around not just how do you run a big school district, but how do you run a school district in a way that is really meeting the needs of young people outside of safety and all these other things, in terms of like pedagogy and your approach to teaching and learning, knowing what young kids are saying, because if half of them are saying they're disengaged, that's a problem, right? So,
Dude.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. Anyways, with that, I think we just opened a can of worms, and that's fine. Sometimes we do
I
that
love can of worms, dude.
here.
I mean, it's too bad that we didn't get to close the can of worms, but I'm all about like opening it.
Hey, you got to be comfortable with that. You got to be comfortable with the uncertainty, with the ambiguity, with having a challenge that's still out there. So maybe we'll come back to this topic. But thank you, Omar, for the dialogue, and thanks everybody for watching us, for tuning in. We'll be back next week, every Tuesday, 3 p.m. PST, 6 p.m. Eastern time. And wow, look at that. All right.